The sky above the neutral zone turned black without warning. It wasn't nightfall, it was smoke. Thick columns rose from the hills beyond the treaty line. For 3 years, that zone had been silent. Peace was never trusted, but it had held until... Now Commander Trelixa, Royal Guard of the Varelian Empire, narrowed her golden eyes as the sound of distant gunfire reached her pointed ears. Her claws twitched against her sidearm. She was assigned to observe the humans, not to fight. But this was no longer a safe mission. Humans rushed through the field camp, soldiers shouting orders, diplomats being pulled into shelters. Among the chaos, one figure stood calm. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even trained for battle. But he stood like the war was waiting for him to step forward. His name was Captain Elias Rourke, a diplomat with no rank in the army, but scars on his back. That said, he'd seen more war than most generals. He turned toward the smoke, not away from it. His eyes locked with Trelixa's, and she saw something in them she hadn't expected. Readiness. Trelixa approached with careful steps. Her armor shimmered faintly with energy shielding. "You are not trained to fight," she said coldly. "You should stay behind the wall." Elias gave her a crooked smile and checked the old sidearm on his hip. "Last time someone told me that. They bled out 10 minutes later," he replied. She didn't know if it was bravado or truth, but something in her gut said this human wouldn't run. Not today. Sirens wailed through the camp. A Varelian scout ship crashed into the north perimeter, flames licking the treetops behind it. The ground shook beneath their feet. The war had come, and the neutral zone was the first to die. A human soldier screamed for cover. Plasma bolts ripped through the air as unidentified mechs broke through the mist. Trelixa drew her weapon and crouched low, but before she could fire, Elias was already running into the chaos. She cursed and followed. It went against every rule in her code, but her instincts screamed louder. He wasn't just a diplomat. Not now. He moved like someone who'd made peace with death a long time ago. They found a group of pinned soldiers, huddled behind a broken wall. One of them was bleeding badly, his screams getting weaker. Trelixa raised her pistol, preparing to defend. But Elias dropped to his knees beside the wounded man. He pulled a bandage from his belt and applied pressure to the wound without hesitation. Trelixa stared in disbelief. His hands moved with skill. She had seen Varelian medics hesitate more than he did. One of the enemy drones hovered above the rubble, its red targeting light locking onto the injured human. Trelixa raised her gun, but the drone fired first. Elias threw himself in front of the soldier without a thought. The shot glanced off his shoulder, tearing flesh and burning through cloth. He didn't scream. He just gritted his teeth, shoved the wounded man deeper into cover, and fired back with his sidearm until the drone fell. Trelixa stood frozen. The mission was simple: observe, protect the Empire's interests, avoid emotional compromise. She was a guard, not a friend. She was supposed to report human behavior, not feel respect for it. But what she saw in Elias wasn't politics or training. It was sacrifice. It was madness. It was something she'd never witnessed in a Varelian noble or even a war general. He was choosing to die for people who barely knew him, and that made her step into the open and fire with him. Side by side, they pushed back the attackers, covering the retreat of the wounded. The battlefield blurred into smoke and fire. Her orders faded from her memory. When it was over, the enemy retreated, leaving silence and ash behind. Elias collapsed onto the ground, blood dripping from his arm. Trelixa stood over him, not with contempt or command, but with a question she couldn't voice yet. She offered him her hand. He looked up, surprised but grateful. As she pulled him to his feet, her mind raced. She had broken code. She had protected a human. She had fought beside one, trusted one, and that scared her more than any gunfire. And deep in her heart, something shifted, a dangerous, silent fracture in the wall she'd sworn never to breach. Trelixa had always seen duty as a straight line. Orders were given, they were followed. No room for emotion, no space for doubt. But something about Elias Rourke disturbed that path. The camp was quiet now, but the silence was heavy. Soldiers walked like ghosts, dragging their feet through ash and blood. Trelixa watched them, her sharp eyes landing on the human diplomat. As he wrapped a cloth around his injured arm, he did not ask for help. He did not report his actions. He simply moved on to the next task, speaking softly to injured men, calming frightened ones, helping load supplies. No one had told him to do it. He just did. Trelixa approached him. "You risked your life," she said, "for someone who may not remember your name tomorrow." Elias gave a tired shrug and adjusted the sling on his shoulder. "That's not why I did it," he said. She studied him closely. His heartbeat was steady, his posture relaxed. Yet behind his calm was something wild, something reckless. She had seen it before in war beasts bred for combat. But this was a diplomat. "Your kind confuse me," she admitted. "You say you want peace, but you run toward fire. You offer hands and bullets in the same breath." Elias looked at her, his face unreadable. "Sometimes peace needs teeth," he replied. "And sometimes people like me are the only ones dumb enough to bite for it." Trelixa felt her jaw tighten, unsure if she was offended or impressed. The councilship above sent new orders. She was to escort the remaining human delegation to a safe zone deeper in the Varelian-controlled sector. The mission was simple: evacuate, protect, report. But nothing about this felt simple now. As the convoy rolled out, Elias insisted on walking beside the supply hauler. He carried no rank, yet soldiers nodded to him with respect. Some even smiled. Trelixa walked ahead, but her ears stayed tuned to his voice behind her. He told stories. Not orders, not politics, just stories. About Earth, about deserts and oceans, about songs and games. The wounded soldiers listened as if those stories were medicine. Trelixa listened too, though she didn't admit it. A ridge rose in the distance. As the lead scout climbed it, his signal vanished. The air shifted. Trelixa drew her rifle. Something was wrong. Her claws flexed as her eyes scanned the ridgeline. An ambush. Energy bolts rained down from hidden cliffs. Screams erupted. The lead crawler exploded in flames. Trelixa dived for cover, her instincts faster than thought. She fired into the smoke, but they were surrounded. "Get back!" She shouted to Elias, but he had already pulled a wounded soldier behind the hauler. Plasma grazed his leg, and he fell to one knee. Still, he dragged the man to safety with gritted teeth. She moved toward him, firing as she ran. Her shield flared as shots struck. Her focus split target and human. Protocol and instinct. Training in something else she didn't. Want a name? A drone swooped toward Elias. Its cannon spun up with a high-pitched whine. Trelixa didn't think. She leapt into its path and fired point-blank into its core. It exploded mid-air, showering them in sparks. Elias looked at her with wide eyes. "You're not supposed to do that," he said with a strained grin. "Didn't your people write rules about this?" Trelixa breathed hard, her pulse pounding. "I don't remember them right now," she said sharply. "Move with me, now." They ducked behind fallen cargo crates, trading shots with the enemy. Smoke filled her lungs, but Elias never slowed. He patched a soldier while Trelixa covered him. He threw a flare to blind the attackers while she charged forward. They fought without speaking, their actions syncing like they'd trained together. For years, when the last enemy fell and the ridge was taken, the survivors gathered at the base of the hill. The cost had been high, too many bodies, too many lost. But the humans looked at Elias like he'd brought them back from death itself. Trelixa stood to the side, her armor scorched. She watched him speak with his soldiers, bandage wounds, carry gear. He didn't demand attention. He didn't ask for praise. But they followed him anyway. She turned away, her thoughts loud in her mind. She was not supposed to respect humans. She was not supposed to feel anything at all. But she had fought beside one. She had shielded him. And now something had changed. She looked at her rifle, then at her hand. It had moved without command, without code. For him. That scared her more than any weapon ever had. The convoy rested inside a ruined outpost carved into a cliffside. Trellixa stood on the balcony, scanning the horizon as dust swirled like fog across the rocks. No enemy in sight, but her claws remained tight around her rifle. Below, the human. Diplomat walked with a limp. Elias's leg was wrapped tightly with a compression bandage. He refused rest, instead moving from soldier to soldier, checking their morale, lifting their spirits with quiet words. Trellixa didn't understand it. Humans bled so easily. They broke so often. Yet Elias kept standing, kept pushing, like his bones were built from something else. She wanted to believe it was foolishness, but it wasn't. The Varelian command had sent her a message, cold and direct. Observe only. Do not interfere further. The human is not your concern. But after the ridge, after the drone, after his blood splattered her armor, she couldn't obey. She deleted the message and stood watch over the diplomat, like he was one of her own, inside the bunker. Elias studied a damaged map projected on a flickering console. They're flanking from the canyon, he said. We're sitting ducks if we stay longer than a night. No one questioned him. Not even the Varelian scout beside him. Trellixa entered without knocking. You shouldn't be standing, she said sharply. Elias glanced back, his face pale, but eyes steady. You're not my nurse, he replied with a faint grin. Just my guardian angel with claws. She didn't smile. But her silence wasn't anger. It was something unfamiliar, something warm and dangerous. She hated that it grew stronger every time he looked at her like she was more than armor and code. The plan was simple. Move before dawn. Take the dry ravine south, avoid the canyon mouth. The enemy wouldn't expect it. But the ravine was narrow and easy to collapse. Risk surrounded them like fog. Elias volunteered to scout ahead. Trellixa protested, but he argued with stubborn calm. If I don't come back, you'll know the path isn't safe, he said. Better me than 10 others. Trellixa hated that she understood. She followed him anyway, silent in the shadows. Her boots never made a sound. She moved like wind. Over stone. Elias didn't see her at first, until he tripped on a root and turned cursing. You really can't let me do anything alone, can you? You are the last diplomat alive in this region, she said. Your death would end any hope of negotiation. He raised an eyebrow. That's the official reason, right? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The ravine was deeper than expected. Cracks lined the rock walls, some fresh. Trellixa reached out and stopped him with a hand on his chest. This ground is ready to collapse, she whispered. One step in the wrong place, and we're gone. He looked at her hand before looking at her face. Then let's step carefully, he said. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't stupidity. It was choice. That was what unsettled her the most. Halfway through the ravine, gunfire echoed behind them. The outpost was under attack. Trellixa turned. Instantly. We're too far, she snapped. We won't make it in time. Elias grabbed a flare from his belt and fired it into the sky. That'll warn them, he said. But we still need to move. They ran. Dust exploded under their feet. Trellixa felt the rock shift below her. One more tremor and the whole wall would fall. A sharp crack split the silence. The ridge above groaned. Stones fell. A landslide began, slow at first, then roaring. Trellixa shoved Elias forward, her armor taking the brunt of the debris. Pain flared down her spine as rocks crashed around them. When the dust settled, they were buried waist-deep. Elias coughed, dirt in his mouth. You all right? He asked. Trellixa nodded slowly, her helmet cracked but functional. "You could have left me," she said flatly. He shook his head. "Not my style," he replied. She reached over and touched his shoulder. For a moment, neither of them moved. The war was still out there, but inside that moment, there was only dust, pain, and something new growing between them. She didn't have a word for it. Her people didn't believe in emotional bonds with outsiders, but Elias made her question that. With every reckless step, every selfless act, he broke pieces of what she once believed unshakable. Trellixa took a breath and stood. She pulled him up and pointed south. "We survived this together," she said. Elias nodded and walked beside her, not behind. Not in front, beside. The ravine ended in silence. Smoke rose from the edge of the hills, and distant flashes of battle lit the sky in pulses. Trellixa adjusted the damaged strap of her rifle and walked slower than usual. Elias limped beside her. His movements were stiff, but his face never showed it. Every time she glanced at him, she saw the same calm resolve. It disturbed her more than panic ever could. They reached the rendezvous point just before dusk. The backup unit was gone. Only blood and shattered equipment remained. Trellixa checked the ground. Tracks led east, dragged and scattered. Survivors had moved under fire. Elias crouched beside a broken drone. Its core had been torn open. This wasn't friendly fire. He muttered. "They were hunted." Trellixa nodded slowly. "We're not dealing with raiders." This was strategic. The enemy wasn't just fighting. It was watching, planning, waiting. That meant someone wanted Elias dead. And that changed everything. Trellixa activated her static answered. Whatever was jamming signals hadn't been turned off. They were still cut off. Elias pulled a small signal booster from his belt, but even that flickered uselessly. "We need to find higher ground," he said. "If we can't call for help, we'll have to make noise big enough to be heard from orbit." Trellixa didn't argue. His plans had saved lives before. She followed without hesitation. They climbed toward a ridge above the outpost ruins. The path twisted through sharp rocks and unstable edges. Trellixa moved ahead, checking every corner with her rifle. Raised. Elias followed, slower but steady. At the top they found an abandoned observation post. Metal walls scorched from fire. Empty crates. A broken turret facing the wrong direction. Trellixa scanned the area for movement. Nothing moved except the wind. Elias stepped inside and found a working panel. The old screen buzzed and flickered to life. He smiled faintly. "I think I can bounce a signal from here. It won't be pretty, but it might work." Trellixa kept watch while he worked. Her eyes never stopped moving. She hated stillness. Stillness always came before an ambush. But it wasn't the enemy she feared now. It was what she felt when she looked at him. She remembered his scream when the rocks fell. She remembered his arm pulling her from the rubble. No hesitation, no calculation, just instinct, for her. No one had ever done that before. The screen flashed red. Elias cursed under his breath. "They're jamming wideband. They know we're trying to reach out." He slammed a fist on the console and shook his head. "We'll have to run again." Before she could speak, a sharp noise echoed outside. Trellixa dropped into a crouch and motioned for silence. Footsteps, multiple, not human, not Varelian, heavily armored. Fast, she pulled Elias behind the door. The shadows moved just below the ridge. Too many for a fair fight. She counted 6. Maybe more. Elias checked his sidearm. It had only 3 charges left. "I can draw them," he whispered. "You take the high flank. Pick them off from above." She stared at him. "You won't survive." He smiled bitterly. "I'll survive." "Long enough." She grabbed his shoulder, firm, not gentle. "Don't you dare throw your life away," she hissed. "I did not carry you through a collapsing ravine to watch you die behind a broken wall." Their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them, then she let him go. Not because she agreed, because she trusted him to make the right decision. Elias stepped out into the open. The enemies froze. He fired one shot and ducked behind a shattered pillar. Trelixa was already above, her rifle spitting blue energy down the slope. They worked like a single organism. He drew fire. She struck from the shadows. The enemies adapted fast, but not fast enough. One by one they fell, until the last dropped without a sound. Silence returned. Elias leaned against a wall, breathing hard. Trelixa climbed down and stood beside him. Blood ran from a cut above his brow. "Stupid plan," she said. He nodded slowly, but it worked. He replied. She reached out and wiped the blood with her thumb. Her touch lingered for a moment too long. He didn't pull away. For the first time, she didn't care about protocol, or surveillance, or orders. All she saw was a human who had defied every expectation, and made her want more than orders could give. They didn't speak. They just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, two warriors in the growing dark. The world was still broken, but something between them had begun to heal. The outpost was now nothing more than ash and twisted steel. Trelixa and Elias left before dawn, stepping over the bodies of enemies who had learned too late not to underestimate humans or those who stood beside them. They followed a canyon path, east toward a Varelian relay tower. If it was intact, they could send a secure signal back to command. If it wasn't, there would be no backup, no reinforcements, and no way out. Elias walked with a limp that grew worse with every mile. Trelixa offered support, but he shook his head. "I can still stand," he said. She didn't argue. She simply walked closer, ready to catch him if he fell. Vultures circled high above them. Not the birds of Earth, but screech-owl-winged scavengers with steel beaks and sonar eyes. They waited for weakness, but found none in the pair below. The trail narrowed until it forced them along a ledge barely wider than a boot. Below them, a dried riverbed twisted like a scar across the valley. Wind howled between the cliffs, carrying the scent of dust and smoke. Elias stopped at the bend. A glimmer caught his eye. "Trip mine," he muttered. Trelixa followed his gaze. She spotted the filament, nearly invisible, stretched across the path. "That's Varelian tech," she whispered. They had walked into a trap set by her own people. Trelixa disarmed the explosive quickly, hands moving with practiced speed. "They want us isolated," she said. "No records, no witnesses. Number. Rescue." Elias didn't react with fear. He nodded, calm as ever. "Then we'll have to be too loud to silence." Trelixa stared at him, unsure if he was reckless or brilliant. Maybe both. They pushed forward. The tower came into view by mid-morning. Its antenna was broken, but the base looked intact. "If the core's untouched, I can reroute a signal," Elias said. Trelixa kept her weapon drawn as they approached. The doors were ajar. Inside, lights flickered dimly. Trelixa entered first. Sweeping each corner, the place had been ransacked. Equipment smashed, blood on the floor. But no bodies remained. Elias found the core console and crouched beside it. "Still breathing," he said. "Give me 20 minutes." Trelixa stood by the doorway, eyes locked on the horizon. Something about the silence felt too heavy. Minutes passed. Elias worked fast, rewiring systems and bypassing fried circuits. His hands trembled slightly, but he never stopped. Trelixa admired that, not the skill. The heart behind it. Suddenly, movement. Shadows flickered across the distant ridge. Trelixa tensed. "We're not alone," she warned. Elias didn't flinch. "Buy me 5 more minutes," he said. She stepped outside and raised her rifle. A squad of unknown soldiers crept closer. Not Varelian, not human. Black armor. Masked helmets, no markings. Assassins hired to erase inconvenient heroes. Trelixa opened fire before they saw her. Her first shot dropped the lead, the second clipped another. Then they scattered, returning fire. She moved with speed and precision, a blur of silver and fury. Inside, Elias winced as bullets struck the tower. Sparks flew from the panel, but he kept typing. "Almost there," he muttered. Behind him, the console beeped, the signal activated. The message launched into orbit. Trelixa ducked behind a wall, breathing hard. "Done?" she called. Elias stumbled out, weapon in hand. "Done." Together, they pushed through the ambush with calculated violence. Neither backed down. Neither gave ground. When the last attacker fell, they stood in the smoking dust. Trelix's armor was cracked, her arm bleeding. Elias's shirt was torn, his face bruised. But both were alive. And the message was sent. They didn't speak at first. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavy with understanding. They had just survived what should have been a final stand. Together, Trelixa sat down against the tower wall. "Why? Do you keep fighting like this?" she asked. "No one expects it from a diplomat." Elias sat beside her, his voice low and even. "Because I have to. Someone has to show them that peace isn't weakness." She looked at him, really looked. Not as a protector or a soldier or a human, but as someone who had given her a reason to question everything she thought uncheckable. For the first time, she let her guard down. Her helmet slid off, revealing her full face. She didn't speak, but the gesture was louder than words. Elias turned and met her eyes. No fear, no judgment. Only truth. And in that moment, something shifted again. Quietly, powerfully, like two stars nudging toward the same orbit. Asterisk. The sun crept higher as the smoke from the skirmish drifted toward the distant horizon. Trelixa cleaned the dried blood from her cracked gauntlet, while Elias reinforced a barricade with pieces of scrap metal. The signal had gone through, but they didn't know if anyone had received it. Still, the quiet that followed didn't feel like safety. It felt like a pause before something worse. Trelixa moved stiffly. Her ribs ached with every breath. She could feel where the armor had cracked against her skin. Elias noticed the way. She winced but didn't ask questions. He just handed her a fresh bandage. "You're not built for this," she said while wrapping it. "You're a diplomat. Your war was meant to be with words." Elias smirked and leaned against a broken console. "Then why does it feel like I was born for this?" She didn't respond. She didn't need to. He had done more than some soldiers in full armor. He had bled for strangers, fought for peace, and stood beside her when every code told her not to trust him. They shared rations in silence. Trelixa handed him a thermal bar flavored like bitter roots. He laughed. "Tastes like regret and old boots." She didn't laugh, but the corner of her mouth twitched. A crackle buzzed through her cum. Static, then a voice weak but clear. Varelian command. The signal had reached them. Reinforcements were en route. But they weren't alone in hearing it. Trelix's ears twitched. She turned quickly, scanning the hills beyond the tower. Movement. Shadows darting between the rocks. Not friendlies. Not survivors. Hunters. "They'll come fast now," she said. "They know we made contact. If they kill us, the message can still be denied. They'll try to bury it under lies and silence." Elias stood slowly and checked his weapon. "Then we don't die here," he said. "Not yet," Trelixa nodded. No more pretending this was just observation. No more following orders from a cold screen. She was in this fight now, not because of duty, but because of him. They set up defenses using what was left in the outpost. Mines, auto turrets, metal barriers. Not much, but enough to make a stand. As the wind picked up, so did their breathing. This wasn't survival anymore. It was choice. Elias adjusted a broken visor and looked toward the east. "If they come, they'll try to separate us. That's their tactic. Divide, then strike fast." Trelixa looked at him and gave the smallest nod. "They'll fail," she said. Her claws flexed against her rifle grip. She wasn't just standing with a human. She was standing with someone who had redefined what loyalty meant. The first blast came from the cliff. A shockwave rolled through the tower, knocking dust into the air. Then came the enemies, silent, armored, relentless. But they weren't ready for the trap Elias had wired behind the south wall. The explosion lit up the sky. Screams followed. Trelixa used the moment to leap into the smoke and fire her rifle with deadly precision. She didn't miss. Not once. Elias stayed back, covering her from the high point, picking off stragglers. They fought like one mind. She moved where he needed cover. He shot where she couldn't reach. It was war without words, rhythm without music, purpose without question, but numbers overwhelmed them. More enemies spilled through the rear gate. Trelixa ran dry on charges. Elias pulled her behind cover and passed her his last power cell. "Use it," he said. "I've got fists and attitude left." She didn't argue, not anymore. She snapped it into place and stepped out to end the final wave. Her shots tore through the enemy line, each blast carving a path of silence into the storm. When the dust settled, their world was fire, ruin, and bodies. But the tower still stood. And so did they. Elias dropped to the ground, exhausted. Trelixa knelt beside him and took his hand in hers. Her armor cracked. Her claws scraped stone. But her grip was firm. "You should have died 100 times. She whispered. "But you didn't." Elias looked up at her, half laughing through the pain. "Maybe I was waiting for someone to stop me." She didn't let go. Not this time. And not for any order from any world. Smoke clung to the wrecked relay tower like a ghost refusing to leave. The dead were silent, but the wind carried the weight of what had been done. Trelixa sat against a bent support beam, watching Elias sleep with his back against the rubble. His face was bruised, jaw scraped, arm wrapped in blood-streaked cloth. But he still breathed. And that was more than she had expected after the last wave fell. The tower's signal core blinked green, proof that the message still pulsed across space. Someone would answer. But the question that haunted her now was what they would do when they arrived. Trelix's claws tapped slowly against the metal beside her. She was trained for battle, for protection, for loyalty to command. But nothing in her training had ever prepared her for what she now felt. When Elias stirred, his first instinct was to check the horizon. Even half awake, his thoughts were still on others. "Did anyone else make it?" he asked. She shook her head once. "Only us," she replied. "Everyone else has fallen or scattered. If reinforcements arrive, we'll be the only ones left." To explain what happened here, Elias didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly. His hand moved to his chest where his diplomatic badge had once been. The plating had cracked in the blast. It no longer shined. But it still meant something. At least to him. Trelixa reached over and gently touched the broken emblem. "You still believe in peace," she said, "even after everything." Elias gave a tired smile. "I believe in trying, even if no one listens." They sat in silence, staring toward the canyon mouth where the first attack had come. Trelixa tried to picture herself standing before her commanders, explaining why she had ignored protocol, why she had fought beside a human, why she had bled for him. She knew the punishment, disgrace, exile, maybe worse. But the thought didn't twist her stomach like it once would have, because something in her heart had shifted. A soft vibration buzzed against her wrist. Her communicator lit up. A signal. Clear and official. Reinforcements were landing within. The hour, a transport shuttle was en route. Elias stood slowly, wincing. "Guess we better look alive," he said. Trelixa stood too, back straight, expression unreadable. "They'll want answers," she said. "From both of us." "I'll tell them everything," Elias replied. "And I'll start with what you did, what you risked, what you chose." She met his eyes and felt a strange heat rise behind her ribs. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. "You're the reason we're alive." Elias shook his head. "No, we're alive because we trusted each other when no one else did." The shuttle roared overhead, kicking up sand and ash. Trellixes stepped in front of him. As soldiers poured from the ramp, they were Virelian, cold-faced, efficient, and armed. One of them raised a scanner toward Elias. She knocked his arm away with the back of her claw. "He comes with me," she said. "No restraints, no accusations. He is under my protection." The other soldiers paused, uncertain. Trellix's rank carried weight, even now, and her voice held the edge of someone who would not yield again. A high-ranking officer descended from the shuttle. His robes were polished, his posture perfect. "You've broken protocol, Guard Trellixa," he said flatly. "You are to return for debrief and disciplinary review." "I accept that," she said without blinking. "But not until I finish this mission. I will see the Diplomat safely to Earth Command. Then I'll answer for my choices." The officer stared at her for a long time. Then he turned and walked away without another word. The soldiers made room as Trellixa led Elias up the ramp. Inside the shuttle, the seats were cold metal and tight. Elias sat beside her, his head resting back as the engines hummed to life. "You know they'll try to bury this," he said. "Pretend none of it happened." Trellixa nodded slowly. "Then we'll be louder than their silence." He looked at her with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You've changed," he said. "Since we met, I haven't changed," she said softly. "I've just decided what I'll stand for. And who I'll stand with." The shuttle broke through the last layer of the atmosphere, revealing the blue curve of Earth against the black sky. Elias leaned forward, staring through the viewpane with a strange look in his eyes. It wasn't joy. It was hesitation. Trellixa sat beside him, arms folded, armor scorched but clean. Her claws were tucked beneath her cloak. She said nothing, but her gaze stayed locked on him as the planet grew larger in the window. "I haven't been back in years," Elias muttered. "I left to make peace. And now I'm bringing war stories instead." Trellixa turned her head. Slightly. "You're not bringing war. You're bringing truth." Their escort ship docked at an orbital station above Earth. The bay lights flickered white as officers stepped aboard. Some were human, some Virelian. All of them carried the weight of bureaucracy in their silence. A representative from Earth's diplomatic corps greeted Elias with a stiff salute. He ignored the gesture and pointed to Trellixa. "She gets the same treatment I do, if not better." The officer hesitated, then nodded. They were led to a debriefing chamber built from glass and steel. No walls to hide behind. No shadows to protect them. It was a place meant to strip people of illusion. Trellixa stood tall under the scrutiny. Her presence was quiet, but undeniable. Elias sat next to her, his hands folded over his knees. He didn't flinch as the questions began. "What happened at the outpost? Why did the Virelian Guard disobey protocol? What proof do you have of unauthorized black ops?" Elias answered every question with the same steady tone, but it was Trellix's voice that changed the room. When she spoke, people listened. Her words were sharp, precise, and unshakable. She did not ask for forgiveness. She declared her choices. "I protected him because he protected the innocent," she said. "I stood beside him because he refused to retreat while others suffered. I broke protocol because my honor demanded it." A long silence followed. Then the council moved to deliberation chambers. The guards didn't move them. They were not prisoners, not anymore. Just witnesses to a truth no one wanted to admit, but could no longer deny. Outside the station windows, Earth rotated slowly. Its surface shimmered with cities and oceans. But to Elias, it looked smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he had just changed. Trellixa broke the quiet. What happens if they condemn us? Elias smiled weakly. Then we tell our story louder, until someone hears it. She looked at him for a long moment before nodding once. The council returned with expressionless faces. One human, one Varelian, one neutral arbiter. Their decision would echo across both worlds. No one spoke as the lead arbiter stepped forward. No charges will be filed, she announced. Your actions fall outside standard doctrine. But the evidence supports your claims. And your service has revealed corruption that must be addressed. Trelixa did not react. But Elias exhaled slowly, the tightness in his chest loosening for the first time since the battle. The council didn't thank them. They didn't offer medals, just silence, cold, official, heavy. But sometimes silence was enough. Sometimes silence meant doors opening behind closed eyes. Back on Earth's surface, the sky was pale with morning. Elias stood on the edge of a high garden, watching the sunrise through layered clouds. Trelixa stood beside him, her cloak flowing in the breeze. I'm not going back, she said. Not to the guard, not to the code. That life doesn't fit anymore. Elias nodded slowly. What will you do? She looked at him with steady eyes. I'll build something better, she replied. A shield that defends more than rules. A sword that protects more than pride. Something worthy of the people we almost lost. He smiled. This time it wasn't tired, it was real. She saw it and returned a faint one of her own. They walked together through the gardens. No guards, no orders. Just two warriors who had once stood on opposite sides and now stood with no side at all. Only a purpose they shaped with their own hands. Peace had never been simple. But standing beside each other, they realized it never had to be. It only had to be earned.